Do you want to add user and admin accounts to your Rails application? If so, stick around to find out how. I'm Thomas with Brain Trust Digital. I'm a full stack developer obsessed with learning. If you're interested in learning full stack development, please subscribe below to receive new content. In this AWS Rails series tutorial, we're going to walk through how to install and configure the Devise Gem into an existing Rails application. We're going to use the Rails application from a previous tutorial, which I'll link right here in the card and down here in the description so you can follow along. We're going to walk through how to create users and admin accounts, as well as a quick profile page. While a profile page is not strictly necessary here, it just seems like a very relevant feature. Typically, when adding users and admins, the next thing you'd need to do is add profile pages. So I figured it just made sense to combine these into one tutorial to save you time. Before we get started, I want to mention that we're also going to be using AWS Workmail for our emails. We set this up in the previous tutorial and connected this to our Rails application so that we can programmatically send out email. So if you haven't seen that video yet, you might want to watch that first. I'll link that up here in the card and then down here in the description. We're going to use this to combine with the Devise Gem's pre-existing functionality of sending out emails for things like forgot password type functionality, or really any other type of email notification you'd like to send to your users. With that being said, let's get into the Rails Devise users and accounts tutorial. To get started, we have our AWS Rails app running locally. So we're going to switch over to Sublime Text and add in the gems that we're going to need. We're going to use the Devise Gem, of course, and then we're also going to use the Devise Bootstrapped Gem. This gem just styles our login and sign up forms using Bootstrap 4. It'll just save us some time and get things kind of cleaned up for us. So we'll save this file, flip back over to another tab in our terminal and bundle install. Once that's complete, we will run the Devise installer with Rails generate, or G for short, Devise :install. As you can see, this creates a lot of files, an initializer, and then it has some steps that you need to complete here manually. The first of these steps tells you that you need to ensure you have a default URL options. This is something we accomplished in the previous tutorial when we attached SES email to our Rails application. So if you're following along, you can just skip step 1. Step 2 wants you to ensure that you have a root URL, which we set in the previous tutorial of pages home. Step 3 wants you to ensure that you have flash messages displayed in your application. You could copy and paste these into your layouts application.html.erb as the comment is suggesting, but instead we're going to pull this out into a partial and we're going to display Bootstrap styled flash notices. So let's do that right now. In app views shared, we're going to create a new file that we will call alert. In this file, we'll just paste out our alert template code and walk through it really quickly. Here we're going to loop through all flash notices. This is a partial I use quite frequently, so at the top you've just got a couple of variables to use as options. Next, we're looping through all of our flash notices, and we're going to put them in a Bootstrap style dismissible alert. Within the code itself, we're going to paste out a title and the content of the message. This partial requires a new method in our application helper, alert class by type. There are different types of flash messages like info or error. We're going to catch these and then place the appropriate Bootstrap style class that corresponds with that message type so that we can get clean styling. So we'll go over to application helpers and we'll paste in our method. This simple method takes in the different flash notice by alert type and then translates that to a corresponding Bootstrap class. So an error would come back as an alert danger. Warning would come back as alert warning so that we can style them appropriately in Bootstrap. This is just a convenient way to quickly get clean Bootstrap flash notifications in our application. Now that we've created our alerts partial, you want to make sure to add this into the views. So we're going to go to layouts, application.html.erb, and add this just above our header. We're going to render shared alert. This way all of our flash notifications will pop out at the very top of our screen, and because we've used our partial and application helper, they'll be styled for Bootstrap. So with that complete, let's go back to the terminal and see the last step. In step 4, Devise is telling you that you can run the Devise views command to copy the views over to your application for easy customization. We're going to skip this command as well, as we're going to be using Devise Bootstrapped that has its own command. The next thing we're going to do is create our Devise model. Rails generate, or G for short, Devise, and our app is going to contain users, so we will call it user. This can be anything you'd like. In our case though, we're going to have users. So you'll hit enter. This will create some files as well as a database migration that we're going to check out in a second. But first we will run the Devise Bootstrapped Gem to generate our views. Now that we've created our Devise model and generated our Devise views, before we jump into the application, we're going to run one more migration to add a few columns to our user model. So here we're going to run Rails G migration, add admins to users. We're going to add an admin column of type Boolean that we're going to set to false. Then we're going to add a few more columns for our future profile page. First, we're going to add a bio of type text, and then 2 more columns, first name and last name, which will each be of type string. Since string is the default data type, we don't need to worry about passing that data type here. So we'll hit enter. This will generate our migration for us. Now let's jump back into the application. We'll go into the database, migrate. Here you can see the migration that Devise generated for us when we generated our user model. Next, you can see the migration that we created ourselves to add a few more columns. Here we want to ensure that our admin Boolean defaults to false. Next, you can see we're adding our bio, first name, and last name. With all that out of the way, now we can run Rails DB migrate to add all of these new columns, including our Devise users. Before we check out our application in the browser, we have to remember that we installed some new gems, so we'll need to break out of the server and restart it. If we reload our application, you can see that everything's working, but nothing's really changed. We still need to add in links to sign up and sign in to our new user accounts. So let's go back into the views. Let's click into our header partial where we currently have our links. We're going to be adding a few more links. So instead of just outputting this here, let's extract this into a partial. Then we'll create the new partial, _nav.html.erb. Then I will paste in the content. Here you can see the home and videos links that we used previously, as well as a few more scoped links that Devise makes available to us. So first, we get this convenient method to check if a user is signed in. If they're not signed in, then we will allow them to either log in or sign up using the new user session path or the new user registration path. Finally, once signed up or signed in, the user would have the opportunity to log out using the destroy user session path with the method of delete. If we flip back over to the browser and refresh the page, you can see now that we have the new links from our partial. So here, let's sign up a new account. First, we'll enter in our email and then a password and click sign up. Here you can see our Bootstrap styled flash message. You can also see that the navigation has changed since now we are signed in. We have the opportunity to log out. Here, if we click log out, then we see the navigation changes again. So let's log back in. If we flip back over to the terminal and enter the Rails console, we can check out our new user. Here you can see our new user that is not an admin. For now, let's just change this via the console. So user.first, update. Now, if you look up the user, you can see we've successfully updated them to an admin. While this works in this one-off case for updating my specific user to an admin, in practice it would be very difficult if you had, say, 20 or 30 users that you wanted to load into your application quickly and assign a few of them to admin accounts. So if you stick around to the end, I'll show you a seed file that I would typically use to execute this task quickly. But now let's go back and create our profile page. To create our profile page, the first thing we want to do is generate a controller. Rails G controller. This controller has to be named users since we have a user Devise model. We're gonna have a couple of actions on this controller. Index to list all users, show to look at an individual user, and edit so that a current user can edit their own profile page. Then you'll hit enter. It's very important that if you chose to generate a different Devise model, say for example member, then this would be the members controller. But in our case, we generated a user Devise model, so we're going to generate a users controller. Next, let's jump into the application and clean up the routes file. You can see that each individual route was added. Instead, let's clean this up a bit with the resource route with our index, show, edit, and update routes. The edit and update go hand in hand when updating our profile page, though the update won't actually have a view. Here, and then let's put this below our Devise for users. Now that we have routes for our users and profile pages, let's add links in the shared partial. So we'll go into our @views shared nav.html.arb. By default, we'll allow everybody to see the user's index page. So we'll add link to users path is going to be the user's path. We'll put a pipe character to separate. We have not yet styled this page, but we'll circle back to that in a minute. First, let's add our profile link. Here, if the user is logged in, then they can view their profile. So if we refresh, that link populates in the navigation. If we click on it, it works, but of course we haven't styled this page. To do that, we're gonna need to update our user's controller. In app, controllers, users, you can see the code that was generated for us. I'll just paste the code in and then we can walk through it. So the first thing you see here is a before action, authenticate user. This is Devise's way of ensuring that the user is logged in. Then we're passing only on the show action. So by default, you'll be able to see our home page and you'll be able to see our user's index page. But if you want to look at users' profiles, you're going to have to be logged in to do so. Next, in our index action, you can see we're just grabbing all of the users in our database and putting them into the @users variable. This is the action that's going to be called for viewing any user as well as our own profile page. So you're just going to grab the user by params and set that as the instance variable user. Edit and update are a little bit different. We don't want users to be able to edit anyone other than themselves. So in this case, we're setting the instance variable for user to the Devise current user variable. Same thing here when we're attempting to update params using the strong parameters, user params. This is just a security feature. Each user can only ever update parameters on their own user account. First, let's take care of our show page. So we'll go ahead and paste in the code and walk through it. Here we're going to output the user's full name, which is a method we haven't yet created, but we'll create that shortly. Next, we're going to output whether or not the user is an admin, followed by their bio. Finally, we're going to insert a link for the user to edit the profile, if and only if the current user is on their own user page. Now let's go into the user model and create that full name method. Full name is going to equal the user's first name, then a space, and then their last name. Next, let's create the edit page and form. Here on the edit page, we're just going to change the headline to edit profile. Then within the content, we will render a form partial that we're about to create. So now let's create that form partial. form_form.html.erb. This is a typical Rails form where we'll pass in the user model. Here we'll output errors, if any, when submitting the form. Next, we're going to allow the user to edit their first name, last name, and bio. Finally, they can either submit the form or cancel the form and go back to the user's path. If we flip back over to the browser and click on the profile page, you can see that this user is considered an admin, but they don't have a bio yet. Let's click the Edit Profile button. We forgot to pass in the instance variable to the partial. So let's go back over to our edit form and pass in user as the instance variable of the user. Then we'll refresh the page. I just want to interrupt for 1 second and see if you're finding value. Please subscribe below, hit the like button, turn on the bell notification for future notifications of content like this. And if you are, we have a limited time offer. Our coworker here, Bear, will perform 1 trick per subscriber. Yes. Down. Yes. Roll over. Good boy. You're the goodest boy. Good boy. Down. Oh my gosh. We're going viral, Bear. Now you can see we're editing our personal profile. And then click Update User. First and last name are output, along with the fact that we are an admin, and then our bio of Hello World. Next, let's create our users index page. Here we're just going to loop through all of our users, the instance variable that we set in the controller, and then output an unordered list with a list item containing the user's full name. Then if we flip over to the browser, click on users, you can see all of our users listed out. I want to walk through this partial to show a few ways that we could optimize it. Here we're iterating through all of our users as a single user instance and then outputting some code. While this is very simple, it would be nice to extract this into a partial. So let's call this underscore user.html.erb. And then we'll paste in the code. Then we will render the partial inside of a loop. Pass in the user variable. Now that we're iterating over users and outputting a singular user partial, this is a prime candidate for collection rendering. Just as in our Rails app tutorial with videos, we're going to collection render out our users. To do so, we'll just delete this line here, and instead equals render users. And Rails knows to loop through each user and render the user partial. As you can see, that still works, but it ends up being a lot cleaner. If we need to edit an individual user instance, we can open our user partial and make changes there. This last step is optional, but it's a way to quickly create several users at once through a seed file. So for example, you want to load dozens of users into your app. By default, you could create entries in this seed file and then run the task to populate that data. While this isn't required, it may be convenient if you have a lot of users that you want to add in bulk. So I'll just paste this in and walk you quickly through the code. First, we have an array of hash objects. The hash objects each contain an individual user we'd like to add. In this case, I'm adding a second user for myself that I'm saying is thomas@example.com. My first name, my last name, and then I'm saying that I am an admin, true. The next, I'm adding my coworker, Bear, the dog. First name Bear, last name Bush, and he's not going to be an admin. Next, we're going to loop through all of our users in our array above. We'll take each instance and search for a user with that email in our database. We'll grab either the first one we find or we'll initialize a new record. Then we're going to update the record with all of the other columns. First name, last name, we'll set the admin value, and then we're just going to set a secure random UUID as the password, and then we'll save the user. As Devise automatically encrypts your passwords, you'd never be able to recover this password. But since we already have forgot password functionality in Devise by default, and we already have our email hooked up to our Rails application with SES, this is not a problem. In your documentation after you launched your app, you'd simply instruct your users to navigate to your new application and choose the forgot password link. Here you can create as many rows as you need. Then to run this file, flip back over to command line and run Rails db seed. This is typically a one-off command, meaning you're just going to run it one time when you deploy your application. But it's nice if you needed to deploy your app into production and then quickly bulk add dozens of users at once. If we refresh, you can see I've got my 2 users. Probably not the best to choose to name them identically, but here is my first original user that is an admin with a bio. Here is the second user that is an admin but has no bio because it was generated with a seed file. Lastly, you can see my coworker Bear, who is not an admin. You can add additional columns to this user's array of hashes if you'd like. Here is an example of adding the BIOS. Remember to add that column into your loop. So here we're going to add bio that we'll take from the user instance bio key. Then if we see the database again and refresh the page, you can see that Bear's bio has come through. So I hope you found that useful. Please remember to like and subscribe, as this really helps out the channel. And feel free to leave questions or requests in the comment section below. And I'll catch you in the next AWS Rails tutorial.